Consider supporting ArchaeoSoup on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in video description. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to another Real World Archaeology. In this series we cast an archaeological eye over film, television and entertainment media, and today I simply could not pass up the opportunity to go and see Tomb Raider 2018 in the cinema. Despite having a cold, I simply had to go. And I say 2018 because I'm a fan of Lara Croft. I'm a fan of the Tomb Raider games. I've been playing them since the 90s, and we have had films that have come out previously. In 2001, Lara Croft Tomb Raider hit the cinemas, and I went to see that when I was in high school. And in some respects, the original Tomb Raider film is kind of the last 90s action film. Certainly for me, at least. It sort of mentally caps off the 90s, even though it's in 2001. It has that 90s feel. It has a relationship to the audience that's a bit patronising. It has a relationship to its source material as a computer game adaptation that's a bit distant, a bit sort of ashamed of the source material, and it doesn't really quite know how to be a film and please the computer gaming audience. And the sequel in 2003, The Cradle of Life, really was not a good film at all. But the original is very much for me a guilty pleasure. It's not an amazing film, but it's fun to watch. Now, over time, obviously, things have changed. The cinema has changed, the audience has changed, and so have the computer games. And in 2013, Lara Croft and Tomb Raider was rebooted, relaunched in a fantastic game put out by Crystal Dynamics, a production company who took what Square Enix had been doing with games like Tomb Raider Underworld, also Tomb Raider Anniversary, this kind of thing, and put it into a setting that was reminiscent of some of the Nathan Drake computer games. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're not a computer game fan, that's okay. But the point is, they brought Lara down to a human place. She was a grad student. She was literally thrown onto an island where she had to survive or die, thrive or perish, become the Tomb Raider, in other words. And it's been a fantastic series for the games to go in. And it's very much that this movie takes its cue from. The 2018 version is most definitely based on the 2013 and also its sequel, Rise of the Tomb Raider computer games. Now, don't worry, this review will not contain any spoilers. I will describe a little bit of texture here and there, but I'm not going to give away any plot points. You're safe in my hands. The movie is directed by Norwegian director Rao Uthaug and stars Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft. And together they've created a very pleasing take on the Lara character. She is a modern young Brit. She is of that sort of grad school, university school kind of age, and she's living in a London that's very recognisable to me. When you go to London, unless you're a tourist, you don't really necessarily see the London Eye, the River Thames and Parliament as you see in so many Hollywood films. In this movie we see sort of Camden. We see a more bohemian and narrow-streeted, cobbled version of London, along with the financial district as well. But my point is, it's pleasing to see a texture to this film that is resonant of reality, I guess. And actually, that's something that does follow through. As fantastical as the movie becomes, there is a sort of a baseline of reason and believability, and I do appreciate that. Certainly, again, in comparison to the 2001 film, where things got a bit strange with like the planetarium, for example, at the end of that movie. You know, what was going on there, or the time travel elements, bit strange. As with so many people her age in London today, Lara is struggling to make ends meet. She's working as the equivalent of Deliveroo, those people who ride around delivering takeaways and things on their back on a cycle or on a moped. And I found that a believable and pleasing thing to be shown. I could relate that they've anchored her in something that I recognise, and that's pleasing. She is also living in denial. Her father has gone missing, as we know from the trailers. He's disappeared, and his whereabouts are unknown. And she is being pressured to essentially declare him dead, so that the company that the Crofts run can move forward, and she will get an inheritance. And this is an interesting sort of tension as well for the character, because she is struggling to make ends meet, but she also doesn't want to accept this money that's waiting for her, because it essentially means signing her dad's life away. Again, it's a pleasing character motivation. Lord Richard Croft is played by Dominic West, and there's also actually a very pleasing bad guy in this movie, played by Walton Goggins, a chap called Matthias Vogel. But we'll come to him in a moment. I suppose my point is the characters and the cast are well rounded, and actually that's one of this film's strengths, is character development. They have room to grow in this film, and they have good motivations. You may recall that back when Liv and I were first talking about the trailer for Tomb Raider, I had some specific concerns regarding character development. And that is that, well, she has a growth arc. In the first game, she goes from being a fresh-faced student who crashes on an island to being this sort of survivalist, all the while with bits of archaeology sprinkled in, so she'll find artifacts and objects and things like that. But in this one, it sounds possibly as though she's already, as it were, a badass before she ever leaves Croft Manor. I am happy to report that this is not the case. This Lara Croft is no wilting flower, but she's also not a total badass. At the beginning of the film, it's clear that she has some development to do, certainly, for example, when it comes to her fighting technique. And over the course of the film, she definitely grows and also darkens as a character. That cartoon that we highlighted does make light of how quickly she becomes an adept killer, but her first kill in this film is very much one that's up close and she feels it. And that's good to see. She's challenged by these actions. She doesn't just fall into them. She's also, as well, not multilingual. This Lara Croft struggles when she first arrives, for example, in Hong Kong. So, as I say, there is room for these characters to grow and some character growth, certainly as much as I wanted or needed in this movie. Now, if you're watching this, I'm assuming you've seen the trailer, and as hinted at in the trailer, the plot does move away from London, and Lara ends up on an island that is very reminiscent of the island in the 2013 computer game. Again, I'm not going to spoil any plot, I'm not going to say how she got there or even what the island is called, but the story will be familiar to you if you have played that computer game. That said, though, it is also quite pleasing that they've taken, I suppose, the vital elements of that story and rejigged it a little bit so that even if you've played the computer game, you don't know what's going to happen next. That being said, there are certain set pieces in this film that play out more or less precisely as they do in the computer game. For example, in the trailer, there's a very strong hint that something is going to happen with a downed Japanese aircraft from World War II, presumably, and that does play out very similarly to some of the stuff that we see, especially in that first 2013 reboot computer game. But that doesn't diminish the experience in any way. In fact, it's quite pleasing to see, because it's paying homage to the source material in a way that the 2001 film didn't. The 2001 Lara Croft Tomb Raider was trying to distance itself from the computer game tropes, I suppose, whereas this movie doesn't. In fact, there are other tropes that make it in, like exploding barrels, for example. I found that quite pleasing. Explodable barrels, I guess. And also certain moments that are very physically reminiscent of those. I'm sure you've experienced this as you've played the computer games, those times when you just got it wrong, and maybe Lara dies time after time in the river. There are little flashes of imagery that will feel familiar if you've played the computer game. That said, though, in terms of structure, this film also pays homage to the best in the genre in terms of cinema. There are moments in this film that are very reminiscent of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It doesn't copy plot points precisely, but it links to them in ways that I found myself sort of smiling at. It invokes a warm sensation if you're a fan of those movies, and whether that's intentional, whether it's like a cynical tactic to make you like this film, I don't think it really matters. It works. As the film progresses, Alicia Vikander becomes increasingly beaten up, as does her computer game counterpart. It's quite pleasing to see some familiar injuries accrued during the course of the film. And actually, when she does meet the bad guy, you feel the same sort of tension as you do when you're playing the computer game. You feel capable. You can you just about comfortable with the fact that you should be able to get out of a situation if you're given the opportunity, but also you feel a sense of danger and also a certain sense of sympathy actually for the villain. In particular, one of the villains in the second computer game, in the Rise of the Tomb Raider, and their motivations is similar to Matthias Vogel's motivations in this movie. You kind of want to see him not so much succeed, but certainly get out of this situation that he's in. And so, in that sense, it's all building with the right ingredients. The computer game, the relationship to other great action-adventure archaeology films, and also character development. Now, I'm not really going to touch on much of what happens after Lara arrives on the island, or indeed the last third of the film, save to say that there are some very clever spins on the tropes of this type of film. Instead of necessarily there being a spiritual element, they actually turn it into quite a good scientific thing that you can see where the myth of this big badness came from. I found that quite satisfying. I also found it satisfying that the old trope of the tomb or whatever collapsing at the end of the story is something which we see in across all these films, in all the Indiana Jones movies, in the previous Lara Croft films. Of course it's going to happen, but in this film there's a good reason for it. Something triggers that collapse that you go, yeah, I buy that, I get that. And so long as they don't repeat that, some of these tropes in hopefully another Lara Croft film, then I'm perfectly happy. Now, if I can put my archaeologist's hat on just for a moment, it's worthwhile commenting on, I suppose, the good and the bad in this movie in terms of the archaeology. There's actually quite a strong good element fairly close to the start of the film, in so much as we see quite a believable archaeological laboratory and sort of analysis space. It's well lit, the surfaces are clean, and it's actually hinted at in the trailer that this area is being used for research. It's not a university lab, but it's a believable home laboratory. So I quite liked that. There was a believable archaeological thing happening there. Some of the bad is that I suppose the archaeology is never recorded. It's frequently blown up or fairly harshly treated, and we do get some of those slightly tropey ancient engineering solutions, especially when it comes to tombs and traps and this kind of thing. There are some slightly eye-rolling moments, but no more eye-rolling than what you get in Indiana Jones, and archaeologists do love a bit of Indiana Jones. So it's good and it's bad, and I suppose to end on a high note, this film takes, just as with the 2013 computer game in particular, takes some really good visual and architectural inspiration from period archaeology. The movie and the game are both set in the Far East. It's sort of just off the Japanese coast, that kind of area, and there is a medieval Japanese feel in this film, and certainly when you see a particular structure towards the end of the movie, I like it. I think they again they're being respectful to the visuals of the period that they're invoking, shall we say. It's not perfect, and it's not as good as it is in the computer game. But then again, in the computer game, they have the luxury of showing not only a landscape but also the story of a landscape, the building of certain structures, its weathering, and then its destruction. In the movie, they don't have time to show you that. You're not exploring it and climbing all over it as you can in a computer game. But I appreciated that. And there's also other things that are thrown in there from a sort of artifact standpoint. For example, references to Japanese puzzle boxes and furniture and this kind of thing. That's quite pleasing as well. I suppose what I'm saying is I've seen worse in terms of the treatment of archaeology and history, and also the MacGuffins, the artifacts that drive the plot. So from an archaeological standpoint, it's okay. So in summary, I liked this film. The movie is being criticised generally for being a so-called paint-by-numbers action film, but surely that is what we needed from this first Tomb Raider movie. A little bit like Star Wars Episode 7, where they had to just show you a Star Wars film so that you had confidence that they could go on and... Let's not talk about that. In this movie, they deliver a competent action movie. Certainly better than for example, I recently saw the Fantastic Four, the most recent Fantastic Four film, which is terrible. The way that progresses, the way that there are jumps in logic and jumps in location that just are very, again, slightly patronising, a bit like the old 2001 movie. So I did enjoy this film, and don't listen to the negative too much. If you want to enjoy this film, there's plenty to enjoy, and if you liked the computer games, there is plenty to like. Is it perfect? By no means, but it's certainly a good start for, and I hate this word, but it's a good start for a franchise. I suppose my only question is whether or not this movie and this franchise is slightly redundant. As I've hinted at with the Japanese architecture, in the computer game you get to bask in it, you get to luxuriate in your surroundings, whereas in the movie you don't. In the computer game you get to have much more of a visceral experience, and in the movie it is a very much guided experience. It's a different art form entirely. And I suppose I am slightly left wondering whether or not we needed this Tomb Raider movie to be so similar to the computer game, but also, did we need a movie at all? That is a question that's worthwhile asking, and ultimately I come down on the side of yes. I think this movie ticks enough boxes and is enjoyable enough an experience that it's well worth watching, and that surely is a good measure for a film. And also the real life portrayal of the character is charismatic and realistic enough that yes, it does warrant its own existence. It does separate enough and become enough separate from the computer game. But there is that lingering question in terms of the experience and the visuals and the character. I suppose what I'm saying is it would be nice to see another Tomb Raider film that follows up on this one that doesn't go the same direction as maybe the second Tomb Raider game. The Rise of the Tomb Raider went to sort of the Russian steppe and a very specific landscape and series of architectural cues and inspirations, sort of Byzantine, this kind of thing. It'd be nice to see the movie not do that, perhaps. Have some confidence, separate yourself a little bit from the source material. You've shown respect for it, and I appreciate it. Now, be a movie and enjoy that movie. Enjoy being, I suppose. That's the advice I would give to the second Tomb Raider film, if there is one. So I suppose finally, if I was to give this film a score, I would give it a solid 3.5 out of 5 soup tins, and on a good day, 4 out of 5. By no means a perfect movie, but for what it is, for what it's trying to achieve and what it's set out to do, and also for establishing its own identity in the shadow of those previous Tomb Raider films, which for many people will be the last big touchstone that they have to the Lara Croft character, I think this movie does a good job. So, yeah, 3.5 out of 5.